Hi everyone, this is Miss Andrews and I am going to talk to you about community service projects and everything you need to know. Okay, so why are we talking about community service? First of all, it's important for you to remember that every student in Miami-Dade County Public Schools is required to complete at least one community service project in order to graduate from high school. If you don't have any hours in the system by the end of your 12th grade year, you will not get a diploma. Also, service projects are meant to address a need in the community. So basically, you're looking for somebody that needs help with something, and you're going to address that by giving them help. In addition, scholarships and colleges and universities often look at a student's community service when they're determining who's going to be admitted or who's going to win their scholarship. So it could come back to benefit you later if you have a significant number of community service hours. The number one question that I get when people ask me questions about community service hours is, how many hours do I have to do? In other words, people want to know, what's the minimum number I need to do? So the answer to that question is, it depends on what you're looking for. So first, let's start with the most important requirement, and that's graduation. The rule for graduation simply says that you have to complete a community service project. There's no number of hours specified. However, to enter numbers into the system, the minimum I can enter is 1 hour, so therefore you must complete at least 1 hour of community service in order to graduate from high school. There are several awards and scholarships that also have minimum number of hours required, so let's talk about 3 of the important ones that we have here. First of all is the Superintendents Diploma of Distinction. That one requires a minimum of 75 hours. We have our Jose Martinez Awards, which basically means that you'll get a cord at graduation to wear with all your other graduation regalia. The minimum for that is 500 hours if you'd like a silver cord, and if you want to wear a gold cord, you need to enter at least 1,000 hours of community service. We also list the names of the students who earn the silver and gold cords in the graduation program, so your name will appear in the program for that. And then we have Florida Bright Futures scholarships. There are 2 levels of Florida Bright Futures. Medallion scholars require 75 and academic scholars requires 100. Let's talk about a little bit more in depth the Diploma of Distinction and Florida Bright Futures. So I have a slide for each of those. Superintendent's Diploma of Distinction. What does that mean? Basically, it's a special designation on your diploma that says not only did you meet the requirements for graduation, but you exceeded them. You went beyond the minimum requirements. Most of the students, when I say most, I mean 50, 60, 70, 80% of senior classes have all of the other requirements for Superintendent's Diploma of Distinction. So I don't want any of you to miss out on that distinction just because you didn't have enough community service hours. So let's talk about what the other requirements are. First of all, you have to have at least 4 honors, AP, or dual enrollment classes. Well, that's everybody in this school because everybody takes honors or AP classes. So everybody meets that qualification. Another one is you have to have a minimum of a 3.5 weighted GPA by the end of your first half of your senior year, by the end of the first semester. Again, because you guys are all taking all honors classes, most of the students in our school have a 3.5 GPA or higher when you're talking about the weighted GPA. Because you get bonus points for your honors classes, your GPA goes up with that. So again, the majority of our school has a 3.5 weighted GPA. And then the last requirement, besides community service, is that you can't have any grades less than a C on your transcript. So as long as you don't get a final grade of D or F in any class, you also meet the requirements for Superintendent's Diploma of Distinction. And again, most of the students in our school do not get D's and F's on any classes. So you're going to probably meet those 3 requirements. So make sure that you meet the other requirement and have a minimum of 75 hours of community service so you can also get the Superintendent's Diploma of Distinction. And once again, this is something that we indicate in the program at graduation, so your name would appear in the graduation program in addition to having the distinction on your diploma. Okay, again, the Jose Martinez Awards, minimum of 500 hours. We give one for 500 hours and one for 1,000 hours. It sounds like a lot of hours, 500 hours, but if you divide 500 hours by 4 years, it's only 125 per year. If you divide 125 per year by 12 months, that's only 10 hours, a little bit more than 10 hours per month. It's not as hard to do as it seems. The deadline to meet this requirement is the April 1st of your senior year. And the reason for that deadline is we have to order the courts before graduation. So you can't turn in hours, a few days before graduation or after graduation and still get the distinction. It has to be by April 1st. Florida Bright Futures. What is that? Well, Florida Bright Futures is one of many scholarships that has a community service requirement. Florida Bright Futures, there are two different levels. You've got the Medallion Scholars and the Academic Scholars. The Medallion Scholars requires 75 hours of community service, and it will cover 75% of the tuition and fees at any Florida public university. What are Florida public universities? That's FIU, Florida State, University of Central Florida, FSU. There's a lot of them in the state of Florida. We have several universities that would cover. It doesn't cover public universities like University of Miami or Nova, and it doesn't cover tuition at universities outside the state of Florida, but there are a lot of amazing universities that it would cover. The Academic Scholars requires a minimum of 100 hours, but it covers 100% of the tuition and fees at Florida public universities. There are other requirements for both Medallion and Academic Scholars, but once again, the majority of our students meet at least Medallion scholarship requirements. So you might want to look into this if you're planning to go to a state school in Florida, because it will cover a lot, if not all, of your tuition. Now, some of you might say, oh, well, 75% of the tuition is a lot of money. I'll just shoot for that. But I want you to take a look at what I wrote at the bottom. The difference between 75% and 100% tuition is about $1,800 per year. That means that if you miss out on Florida Academic Scholars, just because you didn't do another 25 hours of community service, you're missing out on over $7,000 in scholarships. So make sure that you shoot for 100. So going back to that original question that I talked to you guys about, what's the number one question that I get? What's the minimum number of hours I need? If you want my honest answer, I would say 100. The minimum you should shoot for is 100 so that you can qualify for Florida Academic Scholars. Besides Florida Bright Futures, there are other scholarships that either have a minimum of community service hours required, or they may just use community service as part of their determination of whether or not you qualify for the scholarship. So any scholarships you might be applying for, make sure you look into that as early as you can so that you know whether or not you meet the requirements for community service. If you don't have at least 100 hours before 12th grade, you're probably going to be excluding yourself from many of the scholarships, because 100 is a pretty common number for the minimum requirements. And also don't forget that colleges, they may not have a minimum requirement, but they do use community service as one of the factors that they look at when they're determining who's admitted to their university and who's not. So it's something that you want to think about, because the highly competitive schools will always look at your community service. Procedures for community service. What do you need to do in order to get your community service hours recorded? First and foremost, you need to make sure that whatever volunteer work that you're going to do is an approved activity. If you're not sure if it's approved, and we'll talk more about what are some activities that are approved in a few slides, but if you're not sure, your best bet is to always check with me or check with any of the counselors before you volunteer for even 10 minutes, because I don't want you to waste your time on an activity that's not going to count. You do need to keep track of hours you volunteer on an activity log, and you need to list specific dates. You don't have to list every single date separately, but you need to list on your activity log no more than 1 to 2 weeks at a time, and I will show you examples of that. Sometimes you'll get a letter from an organization that will list the total number of hours that you completed for them. If it's a very short project, maybe you volunteered on a one-day activity, and it says you served 5 hours, that's fine. You can turn in the letter like that. If it's a long-term project, you do need to make sure that you're keeping track of the different dates on a log in addition to the letter. You also have to have a signature somewhere from somebody that supervised your volunteer work. It needs to either be a signature on the log or maybe a letter from them that has a signature on it. Somebody that supervised the volunteer work has to sign for you. You parent cannot sign as proof. Your parent can't say, I vouch for him, he did this every Saturday for 2 months. You can't do that. It has to be a person that works for the organization. And also make sure that you're turning in a completed proposal form with your activity log. You have to do a proposal form at least one time in your 4 years. You don't have to do it for every single activity though. We'll get into proposals in just a second. There is a deadline for turning in community service hours. You cannot hold on to hours for the 4 years you are in high school and then turn them all in at the end. You have to turn them in each year. So the deadline that I've set is October 1st of every school year. On October 1st, any community service hours that you did over the summer have to be turned in, or any community service hours that were done the previous school year. After October 1st, the only hours you can turn in are hours that were earned since the first day of school. If October 1st happens to be on Saturday or Sunday, then whichever day of October is the first day of school. So whatever that Monday is, probably the second or third. Anything that you have from previous school years, years before, like 2 years before, if you try to turn them in after October 1st, they will not be counted. So these are 2 forms that can be found on our website, mass3.com, in the students section. The one on the left is the proposal. The one on the right is an example of an activity log that you can use. Some organizations have their own logs, or they'll give you a printout of the number of days that you worked or things like that. If you have a different log, it doesn't have to be this exact same one. This is just a form for you to use if you don't have another log that's provided by the organization. These 2 forms are important though. The proposal is required. Before you get credit for any hours, you have to turn in 1 proposal. Let's look at the proposal a little bit more in depth. One of the most important parts of the proposal are the 3 questions that you'll see in the center section. The first one, in your own words, describe your project in detail. Please print or type neatly. The second question, why is this project needed? For whom will it be valuable? And the third question, what do you hope to accomplish as a result of your work? So in the first question, the one that has a little more space, you're basically just describing what you did. Talk about who you helped, what kind of jobs you did for them, any of the activities that you participated in. The second question, why is this project needed? You're going to talk about who you're helping. Are you helping an organization? Did you volunteer at a charity event? And if so, you can talk about the charity or who the charity benefits and that sort of thing. And then the last one is, what do you hope to accomplish as a result of your work? So what did you get out of the volunteer work that you did? There is not a lot of space on these 3 questions. So I don't want anybody to be intimidated by the questions. Just answer them. You do need to have at least 1 short paragraph, complete sentences for each question in order to get credit. If you don't fill this out correctly, I will return it to you and ask you to redo it. And once again, the proposal form has to be turned in 1 time. So you can pick any project that you work on and fill out the proposal form for that. You don't have to do it every single time. That's the good news. You only need to do this 1 time. Okay, back to the logs. Do I have to turn a log in? The answer is it depends on the letter. So here are 2 examples of letters given to students by different organizations that they volunteered in. On the left, the American Cancer Society, you can see at the bottom I circled this person earned 1 community service hour. So do they need to put this on a log? No, just turn in the letter just like this and you'll get credit for it. On the right is another letter for Study Buddies of Miami, where the person served 100 service hours and they were working from November 2020 to May 2021. So this one requires a log because number 1, it's a lot of hours, and number 2, it was a long-term project that was done over many, many months. So here are the two different examples of, do I need a log? Short-term project that was done in less than a week, you can do it without a log. Long-term project that took place over several months, earned you a lot of hours, you have to complete a log. What does the log look like when you do it? First of all, let's look at the study buddies, which was the letter on the previous slide that required a log. So you can see here's the study buddies log on the right side. There is a section on the log that says project supervisor signature. In this case, because she had a letter with a signature on it, she didn't need to get the project supervisor to sign every single line of her log. She just simply put in that section, see attached, and I know that then there's a letter somewhere that has a signature on it. But you can see down the left side of that log, you've got 2 weeks at a time, November 1st to the 15th, November 16th to the 30th. So this would be a good example of how to take a long-term project and put it down on a log for you. If you don't know specific dates, you can do 1 week or 2 week at a time like this. And then on the left side, that community service log shows you how you can use one log for more than one activity. So if you helped, this person helped Miss Lewis and then helped another teacher, I can't recognize this handwriting on this one. So you can help Miss Lewis and get her to sign it 1 week, and then you can help another teacher another week. You can volunteer with Mr. Kearns in the Green Club and have him sign it another week, and you can have multiple activities on one log. It doesn't need to be a separate log for each activity, especially if you're doing a lot of really short-term ones like helping a teacher after school or volunteering at an event. And then finally, don't forget at the bottom of the log is a section where your name goes, your ID number, your parent's signature. Don't worry about the authorized school official. That's me. I'll sign that when the time comes. And go ahead and count up the hours and put the total project hours at the bottom of the log. Make sure you do this. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a log with lots of signatures on it and nobody filled out the bottom, and I don't know who it belongs to because your name doesn't appear on it anywhere else on the log. So make sure to fill out the bottom. Where can you volunteer? So here are some examples of different places that you can volunteer that are approved. So if you pick anything that's on one of these lists here on this slide, you can be sure that it will be an approved project. So any of the agencies or charities that work with the United Way, a daycare center, a city or county government, the public library, a civic organization, a religious organization, that means like your church, you can volunteer at church activities, parks and recreation centers, nursing homes, hospices and hospitals, political organizations, not an individual campaign. So you could work for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but you cannot work for an individual Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate. Make sure that you know the difference between an organization and a campaign. And then also cultural centers and museums. In addition to these organizations, you can also volunteer at charity events. So maybe your dad's business has a carnival that they donate the money to. You could volunteer at the carnival and earn hours like that. We have lots of different school events where students volunteer and get hours for it. You can also assist teachers or staff at our school and actually at any school. Okay, so what kind of volunteer can you not do for community service? Normally, volunteering for a business, any business that earns profits, is not allowed. So that would be professional offices like lawyers or doctors. That could be a store or a barber shop or anything like that. However, there was a new law that was recently implemented about a year ago that says that students can earn community service hours for a job if they need to use it to qualify for Florida Bright Futures. The reason for that is that we have had some students in the state that they needed to work to help their families, and as a result of that, they were missing out on Florida Bright Futures because they didn't have time for community service. So because that law was implemented and you only need 100 hours for Florida Bright Futures, we are allowing you to turn in up to 100 hours that were earned at either a job, even if you got paid for it, or if you volunteered for a for-profit business that normally wouldn't have been accept it. But you can only earn 100 hours at a for-profit business. Keep in mind that volunteer hours may never be earned for helping an individual, especially a family member, but just one person. Maybe there's an older person that lives in your building or something like that. You can't do it for one person. You can't do it for a candidate, a political candidate, things like that. It has to be for a business or organization. If you're not sure whether or not it's going to be allowed, check with me first. Also keep in mind hours for jobs or other for-profit businesses, 100 is the maximum total for your 4 years, so make sure that you're only turning that in once. Again, always check first. If you're not sure, check with Ms. Andrews. You can keep track of the number of hours that you have on your student portal. So when you log into your portal, you'll see the yellow personal information button that will appear on that main page just underneath where your name is. When you click on personal information, there's several tabs. The very last one is called the Reports tab. You're going to pick the Reports tab, and then you're going to select the Grad Track Report. The Grad Track Report is basically an unofficial transcript. So you're also going to be able to see all your grades and the classes that you've got and everything on the Grad Track Report, as well as your GPA. Right at the top of the Grad Track Report, it lists the community service hours. Now keep in mind that it only lists those hours once I've entered them into the system, and it does take a day or two to upload, so don't drop off hours today and expect that your Grad Track is going to show those numbers of hours right away, because I don't work on entering community service hours every single day, so you have to wait sometimes until I get them into the system. But if you turned in hours a previous year and you want to go back and check because you don't remember how many it was, it should be updated several times a year on your Grad Track report. Okay, let's wrap this up with some important reminders. First and foremost, don't forget that if you are unsure whether or not your project is going to count, get it approved before you start. You don't want to complete a bunch of hours and then find out it didn't count. It's happened before. Make sure that you have a log for long-term projects and that you're listing the dates that you worked in groups of no more than 2 weeks at a time. Something that's really long-term, you can't put, for example, October 1st through January 15th. That's too long. It needs to be listed out in 2-week increments, and get your supervisor to sign that log every time you volunteer. Also, don't forget that you have to turn in a proposal form before you turn in hours the first time. Hours do not get entered without a proposal form. And finally, don't forget that your hours at the beginning of every school year expire on October 1st. I give you a little over a month of school time for you to get your stuff together from the school year prior and from the summer, and it has to be turned in on October 1st. And then finally, don't forget that if you have any questions about any of these things, go to the Student Services office and talk to Ms. Andrews.